good afternoon, everyone. We've got people joining us as we're talking here. But I say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope the new year has started off well for you. Today's going to be a little bit different. This is our fifth session of the Church on Trial, as Dr. Crabb goes over the 7 churches of Revelation. We are on the 4th church today, which is Thyatira. So as Larry begins to unpack the session this afternoon for us, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any comments or any questions, please turn to the bottom of your screen, click on the Q&A button down there to let us know if there's any questions or comments that you have that we'd like to address. If we have time at the end of the session, then we'll definitely try to get to those questions that you have. Want to remind everyone too that our next webinar is on this coming Tuesday, January 19th. So hope you guys can join us for that. So Dad, it's so good to see you.
Happy good to see you, Cap. Wish I saw you more often, but this is at least better than nothing.
It's fun. I look forward to this, but I'm just going to turn it over to you now then. If there's any questions, again, everybody, please press the Q&A button and we'll get started here. Dad, you have the floor.
I appreciate it. Well, as Cap already said, let me welcome you back to the Church on Trial series, the 5th in our 8-week series. And just remember a little bit here, we first introduced the judge, Jesus Christ, in chapter 1 of Revelation. And I hope you remember that we meet him in that chapter as we've never met him before. He was rather strong, insistent, powerful, and a lot of ways of describing him that we had never realized before. So it was a unique first chapter. And now we're working our way through Christ's letter to the 7 churches. And I just want to do a very brief review and then get into Thyatira, because I have a couple of things I want to say that I think might be important. Brief review. In our second Bible teaching, we looked at the Lord's letter to the church at Ephesus, and those Christians, and this is what I understood from the church letter, those Christians were so caught up in doing things for Jesus and defending the faith that Paul taught them that they didn't value their personal relationship with Jesus. By spending time in relational prayer and contemplation of who Jesus was, they really forgot their first love. That's the famous phrase from Ephesians. And they were much like a good husband who serves his wife well, but never hugs her and spends little one-on-one time together. That's how the Ephesians Christians were with Jesus, and it was terrible. And I came away with the question, do I do what I love doing for Jesus more than I actually love Jesus? That's the challenge I got from Ephesians. Now, the second letter went to the church in Smyrna. I want to say it briefly. Jesus leveled no rebuke against the Christians in Smyrna, but his message was really hard to hear, to the point where Satan himself is going to cause them suffering. The whole message of this church at Smyrna was, you're going to suffer. It was hard to hear. You're going to suffer. And Satan is going to throw some of you in jail. You're not going to have a very good time. But remain faithful. This was a message to Smyrna, even as you face death, because you will live again. Remember, Jesus said, I died and I'm now alive, and you will live again with me. Let that be your hope. Well, and now let's see what the Lord has to say for us to think about on his let me see. I got a little ahead of myself here. Let me get back to where I was, and then I'll, looking at my notes, obviously. Yeah. Reading Smyrna, let me go back to Smyrna for a minute now. Got me thinking, given what I said about that, remain faithful even to the point of death. Do I value a comfortably safe and blessed life more than welcome suffering as an opportunity to delight the Father by remaining faithful to his Son? That question came out of reading Smyrna. And then we talked about Pergamum. We're going to get to Thyatira in just a minute or two. Pergamum, the city where Jesus said Satan had his throne. That's a strong sentence. And Jesus commanded the Christians in that wicked environment, he commended them for staying loyal to him. But even so, their loyalty to Jesus was not complete. It somehow didn't keep them from tolerating false teaching within the church that valued pursuing pleasure, including illicit pleasure, over holiness. That came out of Pergamum. Well, when I read Pergamum's letter, I asked myself, somewhere, listen to the sentence, somewhere in my culturally shaped subconscious, do I still believe that the Christian journey is meant to be mostly pleasant, even though Jesus told his followers that we're all going to come up against many trials and sorrows? Well, a couple provocative takeaway questions from those letters. They were meant to be provocative. Well, now it's time. Let's see what the Lord has for us to think about in his fourth letter, the one to the church in a relatively small town named Thyatira. There was an elder back in the days when this letter was written, an elder statesman whose name was Pliny, and once referring to Thyatira, he used these words, Thyatira and other unimportant cities. Well, was Thyatira an unimportant city? Well, I want to see what we know about this unimportant city to understand something of its culture that might have influenced the church in falling short of its call. I always do that. I always want to get to the culture surrounding the church because that's where the struggles begin. It seems there were three somewhat important things about this otherwise unimportant city that I want to mention to give us context. First thing that is actually important to some degree about Thyatira, there was a major road, and it was an important trade route that went through Thyatira on its way to Pergamum, which was the capital city of Asia. And what that meant was there could be an army wanting to invade Pergamum to seize its wealth, but it would have to go through Thyatira, which really was the gateway to Pergamum with its major road. So Thyatira had established an almost adequate military force, adequate enough to at least slow down whatever invading army came through, so Pergamum could get word of the army coming and mobilize its larger army. That was the plan. And because they had that little military campaign, both the citizens of Thyatira and, more importantly, the Christians living there could feel relatively safe, not completely, of course, but foreign nations might even choose another route to get to Pergamum. So that's one thing that was important about this unimportant city. They had a military base to keep Pergamum ready to handle an invasion if it were to come. The second thing that had some importance to the Christians in Thyatira was not a center for Caesar worship. Christians were not required, as they were in other cities, to worship Caesar with a pinch of incense placed on a statue of Caesar. They didn't have to do that. Therefore, it was also true that they didn't take seriously their false gods because they really weren't a very religious little town. They had gods, but they didn't take them very seriously. And all they did with their gods was to celebrate him. They'd have a drunken party, a sexual orgy, and very insincere worship of their false gods. And Christians in the city, and I'm going to make a qualification to this in a minute, but Christians in the city were not required to attend those drunken orgies. And that was important for them. They could feel, again, a little bit safe of not having to compromise their testimony. The believers in Thyatira could feel safe, going about their Christian lives with little threat to their well-being, kind of how we in America feel. We feel pretty safe. When you go to church on Sunday, we're not worried about the government coming in and shutting us down, at least not yet, and I hope never. But as of now, we're able to function reasonably well, and feel really quite safe as we go about our church activities and our ministry activities, and that's fine. But then there was a third thing that made Thyatira a little bit more important. Thyatira, now listen carefully to this, had more trade guilds, today we call them unions, but they had more trade guilds than any other city of its size. Now here's what that meant. No baker, no construction worker, no shoe salesman could make a living unless they belonged to the trade guild. And here's where I back off a little from what I earlier said. All members of the trade guild, Christians included, were expected to attend their debauched parties. Christians had a choice. Either they could compromise their faith by going into a party that worshiped a false god and getting involved in all the debauchery that was taking place there. Either they could do that and join in the depravity of the meeting in order to be able to feed their families. Or if they refused to go to the parties, they would be blocked by the culture from making a living. Now, that was a choice that Christians had to make. And that's the third thing that's kind of important when you think about the church in Thyatira. Now, it's of some interest, maybe not much, but a little bit of interest, to note that the longest of the letters Jesus wrote to the 7 churches was written to the church in the smallest of the 7 cities. And I pondered that when I got a hold of that. Actually, I got a hold of that this morning. Does that suggest that there's something perhaps uniquely important for us to see in this long letter to a small city? Well, it's actually a relatively short letter, the longest of the 7 churches, but still short. And I want to read it to you. I want you to listen. And as you listen, just underline in your mind whatever grabs your attention. And I'm going to read this from the New Living Translation. Here's how it goes from Jesus. Write this letter to the angel of the church in Thyatira. This is the message from the Son of God, whose eyes are like flames of fire, whose feet are like polished bronze. Why that introduction? I know all the things you do. I have seen your love, your faith, your service, and your patient endurance, and I can see your constant improvement in all these things. That's pretty high praise. But I have this complaint against you. You are permitting that woman, that Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet, to lead my servants astray. She teaches them to commit sexual sin and to eat food offered to idols. Now you know what that means. I gave her time to repent, but she does not want to turn away from her immorality. And then listen to how harshly he wants to judge Jezebel. He doesn't like this lady at all. Therefore, I will throw her on a bed of suffering, and those who commit adultery with her will suffer greatly unless they repent and turn away from their evil deeds. I will strike her children dead. Then all the churches will know that I am the one who searches out the thoughts and intentions of every person with his eyes like flames of fire. And I will give to each of you whatever you deserve. But I also have a message for the rest of you in Thyatira who have not followed this false teaching of deeper truths, as they call them, depths of Satan, they actually call them. And I will ask nothing more of you except that you hold tightly to what you have until I come. To all who are victorious, who obey me to the very, very end. But then, and here's the reward, and it doesn't sound maybe like much to us, but I think it's a big deal. But then I will give authority over all the nations. They will rule the nations with an iron rod and smash them like clay pots. They will have the same authority I received from my Father, and I will also give them the morning star, which describes Jesus a little later in Revelation. Anyone with ears to hear, here's the familiar final sentence, must listen to the Spirit. That's what I want to do today, and understand what he's saying to the churches. Well, that's the letter. What stood out to you? Well, what stood out to me, Jesus gave very strong and specific commendation to the Christians in Thyatira because they were doing what Jesus called their works. And there were 4 of them. Now, I want you to pay attention to this because what we're going to see later is something important was missing from this wonderful list. Just keep that in mind as I mention these 4 again. Number 1 was love. Jesus commended them for their love because they were relating well with each other, which is what the Lord wants us to do. Secondly, he commended them for their faith. In other words, they were staying true to the gospel that they had learned, no doubt, from Paul. And then service. They were looking to see what they could do to meet the needs of others. And that's good stuff. That's what Christians should be doing. And the last was relational endurance. Well, Paul talks about that in Colossians 1:11. When things went wrong, they didn't grumble and say, God, where are you? You're letting us down. You're not protecting us from things. They didn't grumble, but they endured problems, knowing God could use problems for their further maturing. But after these strong commendations, and here's the part I want you to think about, Jesus says, but I have this against you. Why would he say that? What did he have against them when they were living so well in their Christian life? Love, faith, service, patient endurance. And Jesus says, I have something against you, and I want you to hear it. Then he goes on to say, you are tolerating an evil woman in your church who calls herself a prophetess. And she is so evil that I'm going to call her Jezebel. I'm not sure that was the name of this woman in Thyatira, but it was the name of a woman many times, many years ago in Old Testament history. You might remember that there is a weak king of Israel named Ahab, and he was stupid enough, foolish enough, idolatrous enough to marry a woman named Jezebel. And this Jezebel, the original Jezebel, was the daughter of the idolatrous king of Sidon, and they worshipped a god like Aphrodite. The king of Sidon worshipped a god like Aphrodite, a different name, but the same kind of a god. And Aphrodite was the goddess of pleasure. So as queen of Israel, which is what she became when she married Ahab, her teaching went something like this. And this is what God is comparing to what's happening in Thyatira. This is what she was saying to the people in Israel. Continue to worship your God of Israel. He's okay, no problem. But there's nothing wrong with enjoying the pleasures of this world. You can have some enjoyment that's not illegitimate. Keep your God, but honor our God, and we'll all have a much better time together. And now Jesus writes, an updated version, if I can call it that, of Jezebel is in your midst. And here's what you're doing. You're tolerating her as opposed to speaking firmly against her. Well, why would that be when these Christians were living such good Christian lives? I read that and I wonder the obvious question, why would Christians who were loving well, staying faithful to the gospel, serving others in their needs, and patiently enduring difficulties that come into their lives, why would they tolerate someone who encouraged Christians to go to parties in honor of a false god where pleasure-packed immorality was going on? My question, was something missing, something really important in the list of commended virtues that Jesus named? Something that might have kept the Thyatiran Christians, and maybe might keep us, from getting lax about false teaching that in Thyatira's world meant it's okay to compromise if compromise is required to make a living. You got to feed your family, for crying out loud. So join a trade guild, go to their parties, and you can have a successful career, make enough money to keep your kids fed and everything going well. A real temptation for the Christians in Thyatira. But here's an important sentence that I came across in a book that I've read by John Stott, a very important, well-respected theologian. He wrote a book called What Christ Thinks of the Church that I've quoted before. But listen to this quote. It opened my eyes to something I really hadn't seen. Stott writes this: the church of Thyatira displayed love and faith, service and endurance, but holiness is not included among its qualities. Holiness isn't mentioned. Why is that important? Well, that observation got me thinking. The virtue of holiness, biblically understood and embraced, I believe would have made it clear to the Thyatira Christians that Jezebel's influence was evil and should not be tolerated. Now, I want to unpack this thought. It's going to be the theme of the next part of this talk that I'm giving. That suggests that as long as I'm content with living as a pretty good Christian who loves pretty well, stays faithful to truth pretty well, serves others pretty well, and patiently endures hardship pretty well, with all that going on in my life, and some of it is, I think I love reasonably well at times, and I serve sometimes okay, and I'm faithful to the gospel, and I think I care about other people and endure hardships a little bit. But if that's all I see in my Christian life, then I can easily believe I'm in no real danger because I'm a good guy. I'm a good Christian. I'm in no real danger of compromise if I don't know what it means to pursue holiness. When's the last time you thought about the pursuit of holiness? When's the last time you really wondered what that means in your life, what it means in my life? Now look with me at a few thoughts about holiness that come out of the Bible. Hebrews 12:14 writes a rather ominous verse. It reads this way: strive for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. That's rather severe. I want to know the Lord is with me now. I want to see the Lord when I get to heaven, but without which, strive for the holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. But then as I read that verse, something intriguing occurred to me. Suppose you reverse it and say the obverse of what that earlier verse actually said in Scripture. How about reading it this way? Rather than strive for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord, strive for the holiness with which we will see the Lord. That changes the whole thing. Now, it's something I don't have to do. It's something I want to do. Can I live with pursuing holiness with which I will see the Lord? Now, let's agree as I get into a little discussion of holiness, because I think that's what's missing in the list of commended virtues. Let's agree that holiness has nothing to do with legalism. And that to me is a very important sentence. It is not a list of Pharisaic rules that we must keep in order to be holy. Here, do this, do that. If you don't, you're condemned. What's the matter with you? Shape up. That's legalism. But holiness is something entirely different than rules to keep. Now, Paul underscores its essential value when he writes these words, and this is in Ephesians 1:4. God, and now I quote, chose in Christ before the foundation of the world that we should be a good moral Christian, that we should love well, do all the good things, hold faith, serve well, be patiently enduring. No, he didn't say that. God chose him in Christ before the foundation of the world that we should be holy before him. This is a big deal with Paul. Now, I want us to get this in our heads as I want to discuss now what it means to be holy. It doesn't mean to be moral. That's obviously a good thing to do. It doesn't mean to even be good, loving, faithful, serving, and patient. What does it mean? Well, we maybe need to go back to the original words, which I'm familiar with only because I have some commentaries that help me see it. In Hebrew, sorry for that noise in the background, I thought I had it turned off. But in Hebrew, the word translated holy is kodesh, Qodesh. In Greek, it's hagios. And both words carry the meaning of separate. And both words, and this is interesting, are used of God more often than they're used of who we could become. And many understand God's separateness from all that is evil speaks to how unapproachable he is. How do you approach a holy God when we're not at all holy, that we're actually unholy? Because it has to be true that no one unholy can ever come boldly into the presence of an unapproachably holy God. So, do you want to come into his presence? Do you really long for a real relationship with God that's going to keep you from compromise? Then it seems to me it follows we've got to strive to be separate. That's what the two words mean in Hebrew and Greek. Then strive to be separate from anything that gets in the way of a living, intimate relationship with God. Think about this. Read the Gospels, and this will sound like a bit of an off-track thought, but stay with me. Read the Gospels, and you see Jesus getting mad a lot. Ever notice that? Jesus really got angry a lot of times. Just a couple examples. In Matthew 23:33, who's he talking to? He's talking to some religious leaders, and he refers to them as you serpents, you brood of vipers. Now, that's really harsh, angry talk. Jesus was mad. Why was he mad at the religious leaders? And remember, too, how angry he was when he made a whip of cords to drive the money changers out of the temple. That's in John 2:15. Why was he mad? I want you to think about it this way, because I think it's the reason he was really mad. He hates everything that gets in the way of an intimate relationship with him. The religious leaders were getting in the way of coming to know Jesus and developing a close relationship with him. The temple, where he really got made up a whip and kind of beat the money changers and drove them out of there, the temple kept women and Gentiles in the outer court, not in intimacy where God actually in his own way dwelt. He kept people from coming near to God. Now let me say it again. Jesus hates everything that gets in the way of an intimate relationship with him. That's why he was mad at the religious leaders. You guys are putting so many rules on their back that they have to keep these rules before they can even approach God. That isn't the way it is. Our God is forgiving. I've made arrangements for your forgiveness, and I invite everybody, women, children, Gentiles, everybody, to be close to me. You're getting in the way, and that makes me really, really angry. Now, this time our understanding of holiness, it turns our understanding of holiness upside down. See if you can agree with this. Holiness is not an obligation to dutifully obey. But I think that's how we see it. Here's the rules, keep them. Are you holy? Are you not watching pornography? Are you not being mean to your friends? Are you loving people well? Here's the rules, keep them, and then you'll be holy. That is not the point of holiness, I'm convinced. Rather than an obligation to dutifully obey, it's a gracious opportunity to seize. Now, let me tell you what I think I mean by that. Here's where we get into something a little bit tricky. Suppose you're talking with a friend who's been holding a grudge against someone who betrayed him. With a wrong legalistic understanding of holiness, you might say something like this. And if you do, I believe you're missing the point. But you might say something like this with a wrong view of holiness as an obligation to obey. Look, guy, you know, holding a grudge is wrong. I think I got some verses for that somewhere. And you really need to repent and just give up your grudge. What's the effect going to be on that guy? Well, I'm still mad. And I know I should give up the grudge, but I don't know. I just don't know if I can or not because I'm really ticked. I've really been hurt. And I know it's wrong, but I don't feel any power in your words. Maybe I'll try, but I really have not that much of an interest in giving up my grudge. It really feels justified. Now, shift your view of holiness to something else. Shift your view of holiness to an awareness that holiness has more to do with seizing a much desired opportunity. If you believe that, opportunity for what? Well, listen to what I suggest. You might respond to your good grudge-holding friend maybe along these lines and see if you can notice what I think is a radical difference to a guy who's obviously living in an unholy way, holding on to a grudge. Now you're talking to your friend. Look, because you're a Christian, there's somewhere inside of you you'd really like to love Jesus more and enjoy more of who he is. That's just part of your new heart. That's just part of your new heart that longs to know the Lord and to be who he's called you to be. And if you hold onto your grudge, here's what's going to happen. You're not just holding on to a sin, you're holding on to your grudge. And if you do so, you won't be in any way loved less. You're already forgiven. You're already loved just as much as God loves Jesus. So I'm not asking you to get loved. You already are loved by God, even while you hold your grudge, and no more than when you give up your grudge. But you won't enjoy his love as much as you want to. And if that's not true in your soul, man, it's true in mine. There's been times in my journey in the last couple of months that I know I'm loved, but it just hasn't felt like it. And I wonder where has there been some awareness on my part that giving up certain things that I'm capable of becomes a roadway, an access into the Father's presence. And as Jesus, with his Father, I'm sure, and the Spirit as well, who hates everything that denies anybody to their access, and your friend's grudge denies him to access to God and to the enjoyment of Jesus' love and all that Jesus is. And then you might say to your friend, you might claim the freedom Christ gives you, not so much the strong rule, but you might want to claim the freedom that you have in Christ. Paul talks about that in Galatians 5, that it gives you to pursue holiness, moving past your grudge so you can come closer to Jesus. Are you getting a picture of a different view of holiness? When I thought about this just for the last couple of days, it really kind of rocked me a little bit, because my view of holiness up until recently was get it right, do better, then now you're a holy person. No, not that at all. Second example, I want to make this point. I want you to get it. I want to get it. Consider that maybe you're talking to a friend who lets you know, because you're close friends, that he really struggles with an addiction to pornography. Now, a legalistic view of holiness, do this, don't do that, might likely lead you to say something along these lines. Come on, friend. You know pornography is sinful and it provides no deep or lasting pleasure. You know that. You just got to get past this. It's really important. You just got to mortify the flesh, which of course you do. The Bible says that. You've got to kill it. And I want you to do that. And I can hear the response, it's really too hard to do. I've been addicted for a long time. And I live with a lot of stress at work. And this really helps in a way. And I know it's wrong, but I just don't feel the inclination that you claim is deep in my heart to get over this thing. So I don't know if I'll be able to or not. Yeah, maybe I'll go to a sexual addiction recovery group. I don't know, but I can't say I'm very persuaded by your input. But if you realize Jesus is really angry, divinely angry against whatever keeps his relationship distant from his followers, then you'll understand holiness to be as sweet to a sweet-toothed person as a piece of chocolate fudge cake. If that's your understanding of holiness, something as sweet as a sweet tooth that enjoys a wonderful, rich piece of chocolate cake, then you might say something very different than you'd have said with the wrong view of holiness. Keep on watching porn, and the Lord will continue to long for you. Let me say that sentence again, it's important. Keep on watching porn, and the Lord will continue to long for you to enjoy him more. That's what he wants. He's the most supreme person in the universe, the best person in the universe. Nobody's like him, and he's available for us to know and actually enjoy. So keep on watching porn, and the Lord will continue to long for you to enjoy him. Yeah, porn is sinful. There's no question about that. But it's sin that is not just wrong. It is, but it's sin that puts a cloud, a dark one, over your relationship with Jesus. Decide what you most want. Think hard about what you most want in the deepest part of your soul and pursue it. There's a thirst within your soul to know God, to enjoy the Savior, to trust the Holy Spirit. Decide what you most want, discover that, and then holiness is going to become attractive because with it, you will see the Lord. Now, as I have been saying all that, I want to give maybe a little more personal example. On a more personal note, I seem to have a gift for sarcasm. When people say something, I reflexively, without effort, come up with some kind of a sarcastic comment, which has nothing to do with the well-being of another and everything to do with maybe a kind of a proud sense of superiority on my part. So when I recognize my inclination to say something sarcastic or to have already said something rather sarcastic, what am I to do? Well, with a wrong view of holiness, I simply might say to myself, well, that's wrong, so I got to mortify it, got to kill it, and then I'll be holy. No, I missed the point. Rather than that, it seems to me I need to say, my sarcastic attitude is really preventing me from getting more in touch with who the Lord is and getting to know him better. And when I think about that, that's somehow deeper in my heart than the enjoyment of a sarcastic comment, which is sinful. Then the motivation shifts from I should do it, but I want to go past that. And now with the motivation that God tells me in the new covenant, I really do have to get past my sarcasm and whatever other unholy sins I commit every day, then there's going to be a desire as opposed to, oh, I know I should, an obligation. Now it's a freedom to move past my sarcasm in order to get more in touch with Christ. So what I hear as I listen to the message from Thyatira, here's a summary that I have written out. I want to read it to you. That I think is the major, I'm sure there's more. There's much more to say about Thyatira, but I'm limiting it. I talk to what I think is central, which I think is the absence of holiness in the otherwise Christian virtues that we discussed in the opening verses of the letter. Here's what I think is the message from Thyatira. Move beyond loving well. Move beyond keeping the faith. Move beyond serving the needs of others. Move beyond patiently enduring hard times, all of which are wonderful to do, but they're just not enough to resist the temptation of Jezebel to make a living by compromising your obedience to God as the only true God. Those are not going to keep us from a Jezebel-like temptation. Move rather into the pursuit of holiness that keeps you from buying into the teaching of modern day Jezebels, which are probably in every church, or at least many churches, what Jesus called in the Thyatira letter, the deep things of Satan, which Jezebel was calling the deep things of God. And as you freely choose to give up whatever keeps you distant from the one who loves you most, then there's going to be a shift in your soul. And I believe that that's the essence of living holy, separate from whatever interferes with the deepest thirst in your soul, our shared thirst for God. And to draw this rather brief talk, I suppose, it's a little bit brief. After pondering what the Lord is saying to me in the letter to Thyatira, I came away with this rather challenging and somewhat convicting question. Is it possible that I, Christian now for 69 years, who does love pretty well and hold the faith pretty well, maybe serves pretty well, sometimes is pretty patient with my troubles, not always. But is it possible that I value the pleasures of Jezebel-encouraged sin more than the joy of knowing Jesus better? If that's true of me, and if that's true of you, and it might be true of some of you and maybe really true of me at times, if so, then I'm living what I would call a stultifying, an oppressive view of holiness that really holds very little appeal. I would like to understand holiness that involves the expression of freedom, not law, not obligation, but opportunity. And those are my thoughts as I read Christ's letter to Thyatira. Hope that encourages you a little bit. It's reshaping my view of holiness, and I think giving me a little better opportunity, a little more welcome opportunity to pursue holiness with which I'm going to see the Lord. And that's really a big deal. Thanks for listening.
Dad, I just love it when you open up scripture and teach. And this was an incredible time. I read the letter this morning to Thyatira as well. And your main topic of holiness in this, I enjoyed what you said in respect to holiness versus legalism.
Yeah.
And that kind of hit a chord with me, because one of the things that you have always, certainly in the last several years, emphasized is the whole notion of relational holiness.
Yes.
How does that all fit into the whole notion of holiness in the way that you were talking about it?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point to make. I talk a lot about relational sin, because I think too many of us don't even think about relationally sinning. We think about behaviorally sinning, watching porn, having an affair, robbing a bank, whatever we do, lying to somebody. But relational sin is putting my interests above yours as I interact with you. And then when I began talking about relational sin, I began thinking about relational holiness. But back when I coined that term, I'm sure somebody else used it before me, but back when I had the term in my own vocabulary, I wasn't sure what it meant. I really was thinking more about relational holiness was loving well and all those four things that Jesus commended them for, just really love everybody well, keep the faith, serve others well, patiently endure. And that's all I really was thinking about, living a really good Christian life. But now I'm coming to understand that relational holiness is in pursuit of a more enjoyed relationship with God. It isn't just something you ought to do. It's an opportunity. Relational holiness is an opportunity to really have a deeper sense of the Lord being with us. And I need to confess that that my relational holiness movement toward wanting to put myself in a position where pursuing holiness will bring me closer to God doesn't always bring me an experience of God's presence. I wish it did, but it does bring me a more settled sense that he never lies. And he told me, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And then by faith, I can more easily believe that truth if I'm pursuing relational holiness as I'm now defining it really for the first time in quite some time.
Yeah.
And it really feels important to me because, you know, a lot of folks on the website, whatever they're on right now on the screen, they know something about some of the struggles I've had with neuropathy and cancer and some other things that are really challenging for me, which makes me wonder, God, what are you doing right now to help me out with all this stuff? But if I understand relational holiness and understand what real pursuit of holiness is, I do develop a more settled sense that he is with me. And then I begin to wonder, he's really good to me. And he's not good in ways I want him to be, but he's good in ways that when I see him, I'll say, you didn't make any mistakes at all. And I really do have a deeper sense of that when I understand pursuing holiness the way I've just described.
You talked today too quite a bit about God being angry
Yeah.
and angry at a lot of the things that are happening. I think one of the things that you've said several times that has impacted me is that we have the opportunity to bring the Father pleasure.
Yes.
By how we live. And one of the things that you've coined, I don't know, again, if this is something you've coined or you got from somebody else, but was the whole notion of good enough Christianity.
Yeah.
And it kind of struck me as you were talking about Thyatira with them loving well and serving well and all of that, but yet the lack of holiness. How does good enough Christianity fit into that? In that sense, that's something I think that we all struggle with. I know I do certainly at times. And unpack what your thoughts are a little bit, Dad, real quickly on good enough Christianity.
Well, I don't want to be sarcastic or cynical, which I could tempt to be a little bit each of those. But when I think of good enough Christianity, I think of what might actually be, and this might sound a little cynical or harsh, I think it's an epidemic in the American church. And what I mean by that is pretty much what I've been saying, that I've got a lot of friends over the years and friends right now as we live in Charlotte that wouldn't miss church on Sunday, that neither of them has ever cheated on their spouse, that they give generously to the church, that they read their Bibles every day. And I really believe that very few of them, including me up until maybe recently, have no real concern with the definition of holiness that goes beyond moral, good Christian virtues. And I think that's good enough Christianity because it doesn't bring us as close to God, as close to his reality as true Christianity could. But true Christianity, given those verses I've read, means that God knew before the foundation of the world that he was calling us to be holy, not simply to be moral, not simply to be good enough Christians who don't miss church and give generously and all the other good things that Christians should do. But it just is good enough. It's not true Christianity. And I think that's a terrible mistake that I've been guilty of back in my earlier days when I was on the road preaching and writing books and holding seminars and all that. Man, I was a really good Christian. I was doing everything really good. And I think that I was guilty of good enough Christianity because holiness, in the meaningful sense that I'm using it today, simply was not in my vocabulary. But it is now. And I'm thinking about it and I'm chewing on it. Don't have any resolution on it yet, but it's a category now for me to think in. And I hope it's a category for all our listeners today to ponder a little bit more as they reread Thyatira.
The weight of holiness is just something that I'm having trouble getting my mind around. Just what we're really called to in respect to holiness, not missing the mark. There's one more question, Larry, that I think I'd like to end with here, but can you truly love well, live faithfully, serve others honestly, and endure gracefully if you're not pursuing holiness? Could those be empty accomplishments that are also deception of Satan? And maybe they're just lacking in freedom. So again, it just really talks about the holiness aspect of how that affects how we live.
I think that question was well expressed. I believe that, yes, it's quite possible to love reasonably well and all those four things. I think it's possible to do that, but I don't believe that it's close to what is available to us. And could it actually be a demonic illusion that because we are living reasonably well, and I think a lot of Christians do live like that, and I don't think it's bad in and of itself, it just doesn't get to what's available. And I think that the devil is quite interested in keeping us from getting to what's available in Jesus and in our relationship with him, because until we're drawing close to him, until we believe that nearness to God is my only good, that's in Psalm 73, until we believe that, we're going to be satisfied with good enough Christianity without any realization that we're not really pursuing holiness, as I believe the Thyatira letter helps us to find. So yeah, I think it could be a demonic illusion. I think it'd be a deception, and I think it's very sad. And I hope that whoever's listening to this talk might take it seriously the way I want to, and I know the way you want to. Will I be confused? Am I going to get it totally straight? It's going to be a long haul, but it's a category to think in, and that's really all I'm leaving you with. That's all I'm leaving myself with.
Yeah. Well, Dad, I think we brought the Lord a little bit of pleasure today.
I hope so. I believe it.
And I just was so excited to hear what you had to say. So, folks, thanks for joining us today. A couple of quick announcements. February 10th, catch the Fifth Church in what's happening today with this series here. That's on February 10th is our next one. We also have a webinar coming up on January 19th. We're going to be talking with Larry a little bit in that during that time about some of the transitions that are happening now. And we'd encourage you guys to join us for that. Other than that, thanks for joining us today and have a great rest of your week. Please be safe and be healthy. And God loves you. Have a great day.